we saw, Matt, last week the markets really move up internationally. Some of the big international ETFs like GXC and FEZ, that's the European ETF, moved rather aggressively on last week, and they're moving again today on the vaccine news. Can you give us a little, Nick's given his comments on the international aspects of this. Can you give us your thoughts?
Well, I think the market action we saw last week is reacting to some of the polls and ballots that were already been cast and counted as the week went on. If under a Biden-Harris administration, foreign stocks would likely be more beneficial to have in your portfolio than, say, U.S. on a relative basis, just because Biden is more of a globalist. We're likely to see a reprieve of some of the tariffs in sort of more formal pacts within some of the nations where they put some levies on. So that would be overall net positive growth for international markets like Europe as well as China. And that's why we saw some really strong action last week. And then carry on today with the vaccine news. I think that's only going to add to the positive sentiment in that region, particularly as Biden gets into the office.
Yeah. I want to bring in Brendan Ahern from Crane Shares here, an old friend of mine, an old China watcher. Brendan runs the China Internet ETF. KWEB is the symbol there. He also runs the China A Shares ETF, which is the China mainland. The symbol there is KBA. Brendan, thanks for joining us. Before I ask you about China, I want to ask you about the sort of international market question that we had just been discussing here with Matt and Nick. The markets globally seem to have rallied on some hopes that there would be that Biden is a globalist and there'd be fewer tariffs maybe out there. Can you give us your thoughts on that? Do you think there will be less international tension and fewer tariffs?
I do. I think that Biden is clearly going to take a more pragmatic approach, less tweets, less temper tantrums, kind of more traditional diplomatic discussions. So I do believe that it is a net positive for non-U.S. equities, and I think the markets are proving that out.
Yeah, I guess the problem, the only pushback I would give, and any three of you could answer, is Biden himself is still somewhat hawkish on China, number one, and number two, there will be some pushbacks about just completely removing tariffs in the Congress on that. I mean, is that really a truly done deal? Anybody want to go in on that? Because that's the concern I have. I mean, it seems like there's going to be some pushback. Yeah,
my one view, Bob, is that Joe Biden got elected to focus on domestic issues. And I just think, China was a little bit of a distraction technique for Trump. Look over there and not in the mirror. And I think Biden will be much more focused on a domestic policy, and I think international policies, if it's tariffs, if it's going at, threatening China. I mean, I think we can kind of call it what it was. It was simply a distraction technique, and I think Biden was elected to focus on domestic issues, and I think that takes some of the scrutiny, at least dials it down a notch.
Yeah. Don't you think though, that there's still... Go ahead. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I think there's also just more of a procedural issue, too. Trade powers are much stronger within the White House. They don't really need congressional approval, as we saw under the Trump administration by, executive order placing tariffs on China and countries within Europe. And I think you could see the same, but reverse, under a Biden administration where it seeks to be more globalist and use more trade partnerships instead of actual individual tariffs targeted at one specific country.
Yeah, I would agree. Biden is more of a globalist. He'll certainly try to get us back into the Paris Climate Accords. But Nick, for example, he seems to be a bit of a hawk on the global supply chain. I mean, I think there seems to be clear efforts or noises to continue to bring certain critical parts of U.S. Infrastructure back. For example, medical supplies. I think we all got caught a little flat-footed about how much China was producing of our medical supplies. Don't you think, Nick, certain trends are going to continue, like, bring certain supply chains home?
Yes, you certainly nailed exactly the right one in terms of long-term trends. Localization of supply chain, definitely an issue. What I'm looking for is to see what happens with all the blacklisting of Chinese companies that we saw under the Trump administration. And if we begin to see an unwind of that, particularly with Huawei going into 2021, because what's so important for Chinese equity investors, and Brendan can talk to this as well, is where is technology going in the Chinese stock market over the next couple of years? Because that's really been a key driver of why that market's done well, particularly this year. And can that continue with a easier overall trade policy and IP policy from the U.S. towards China?
Yeah. Brendan, you want to respond to that?
No, I would agree with Nick. Always good to be in agreement with Nick. But yeah, if you look at within KBA, we have a higher weighting to Shenzhen than other definition of Chinese A shares. And Shenzhen Stock Exchange is up 3 times as much as the Shanghai. So Shanghai, more value sectors, mega cap, large cap. Shenzhen, more growth-oriented names, predominantly tech, mid cap, small cap. So some element of KBA's outperformance has been driven by having a little bit of a higher weighting to Shenzhen. And to Nick's point, overnight you had a lot of the tech war sensitive securities, ZTE, a lot of the 5G names, a lot of the telecom names rallied very strongly on a more pragmatic approach from the Biden administration.